looking for ways to dramatically and significantly improve manufacturing productivity is a conversation most leaders want to have. They were able to take a standards-based information model for a weigh scale, for a small PLC controller, bring that information into the cloud with no on-premise infrastructure, and using Excel, solve their quality and reliability challenges for less than $4,000. Just an extraordinary capital project for this tiny manufacturing company that would have had to spend probably $100,000 in a non-interoperable environment. Standards and rigor be damned, right? That's the cost of doing business. With the right mindset, with the right change management, with the right solutions and the right level of interoperability, we can absolutely reduce cost and complexity.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Practitioners Unplugged podcast. We're coming to you live from Schneider Electric's Innovation Summit North America 2025. Today's episode, we have John Dyck with us. John has spent over 25 years, 30 years now, in the industry. He currently sits as the CEO of CESMII organization, which we'll get into a little bit about what that means in a little bit. John's worked in various high-level positions at some of the large industrial manufacturers over the years, such as GE, Rockwell, etc. Today he's going to share his perspectives on interoperability. So with that being said, John, welcome to the podcast. Can you, if I didn't do you justice in the introduction, can you take a couple minutes to just explain a little bit more in detail about your background, what you do today at CESMII? Take it from there.
Yeah, thank you. It's an honor to be here. So I've spent my entire career kind of in the manufacturing, OT, and IT space, starting largely on the automation side and then moving more and more specifically to the manufacturing IT and manufacturing information side. And I had the privilege of being at the nexus of this gap that's often dividing the OT community and the IT community. And I think the technologies and the capabilities that Schneider and others are focused on today are playing such a vital role in reducing cost and complexity and truly enabling value creation for manufacturing. That's what we call smart manufacturing, obviously. And interoperability is at the heart of that. And it's been my privilege here as the CEO of CESMII for the last several years to engage with great companies, great thinkers, great leaders in this space and work together to solve some of the big problems that have prevented us from being more productive or more competitive as a manufacturing nation. So, yeah, again, thanks for having this conversation with us today.
No problem. Now, you were quoted saying interoperability is the foundation of everything we do at CESMII. Without smart manufacturing, smart manufacturing remains a privilege for a few. With it, it becomes a platform for the many. So can you just unpack that statement a little bit and then give us a definition of what interoperability is? Is it another buzzword? Like, what does it mean for executives out there when it's being fed up the food chain or at summits like this?
Yeah, so interoperability is one of those loaded terms, but it remains a super important idea and capability with very real outcomes. 30 years of manufacturing data solutions in most manufacturing organizations has created significant technical debt for most manufacturers to the point where great manufacturing companies have done highly innovative things, one use case at a time. They've been solving problems. They've been, whether it's productivity, whether it's quality, whether it's maintenance, regardless of the domain, they've built up these great, highly innovative solutions, but each one of them is its own data silo and its own stovepipe architecture. And so when great new capabilities show up, as we've seen with the fourth industrial revolution and certainly now with AI, we're prohibited from innovating at scale because of that lack of rigor and lack of focus on data standardization and data foundations. And so most great manufacturing companies have figured this out. Most vendors have figured this out. But the real question is, how can we solve this interoperability problem? Because it's not something any one vendor can do on their own. It's not something any one manufacturer can do on their own. And so that's the unique role we get to play, is to bring this community together and solve this problem in ways that can only happen through major collaborative efforts like the ones that we're representing as partners. So interoperability is the capability of disparate software systems, applications, functions to communicate with each other seamlessly and effectively using standard interfaces and APIs. And so as much as that might sound like a bunch of buzzwords strung together, it really isn't. It's the intersect between all of these data silos, these incumbent existing data silos, and going forward as new solutions are built and new problems are solved, as we try to implement AI at scale, we have to do so on this foundation of interoperability. That's how we get to scale.
Yeah, AI at scale is definitely something everyone's chasing right now, and it seems like that lack of interoperability or that siloed data is definitely a prohibitor that we hear as a reoccurring theme. The other thing that you mentioned, and maybe sure you want to take this because it's passionate to you, is the technical debt aspect of that. So one of the things that we have a lot of conversations with people really is how do you convince leadership to unpack 30 years of bad habits or overcome this technical debt, because there is an investment involved into doing that. And Sri, I don't know if you want to elaborate on that.
It's interesting that some of this is actually making a new language and making a lot more people understand it. With AI, I've certainly had to, learn my fair share of new words. I think interoperability is something that we have intuitively known, we have worked towards. Open systems is not a new concept. I think it's something that we just need to continue to evangelize and get maybe the first thing we do is we agree on what the words are.
Yeah.
Right. I have looked for, looked at a thesaurus and said, what else can I use besides interoperability? Because people seem to have difficulty just saying the word interoperability. But, it's a good word. And if we, propagate that, we all agree on, some of those things. I think some of that is just a lexicon. Then another aspect of it is this whole idea of top-down versus bottom-up. Because I think there's a lot of effort, if you look at all OPC, UA, all these various standards bodies there's a lot of bottom-up effort, but it has lacked a top-down concerted push. Mm-hmm. Because if I look at something like, supply chain that kind of came into being in the 90s, there was no VP of supply chain before that. But somebody said, hey, my mission is to tear down the walls until there aren't any. So similarly, I think interoperability also needs some kind of some top-down driven mission. So as you've been out there evangelizing, like, what are you seeing, and is the light bulb going off?
Yeah, I think that's a great tee up for a very complex set of conversations and industry challenges. We got here by 30 years of complex, highly innovative problem solving, what we called unbridled innovation. So it's not going to resolve itself overnight, but the conversations are taking place. But it takes reminding leaders, executives that are deciding where and how to spend money on the shop floor in operations. It takes them understanding and helping them understand that historic efforts to scale innovative solutions have often stalled because of the level of complexity and cost. And when you can point out the direct correlation between these data silos and stovepipe architectures and the cost of deploying a solution across a business unit or an enterprise, and how those efforts almost always stall. I can count on one hand how many Fortune 100 companies, never mind the rest, how many Fortune 100 companies have effectively scaled large-scale manufacturing operations, platforms, and solutions across their entire fleet of sites. And when you can connect those dots and say, you've been innovating, but you've been innovating in a way that prevents this from adoption at scale, and then connect the dots back to data foundations and the reality that we haven't had a data foundation in the OT space because we've made heroes of all of these individuals solving problems on the shop floor, what we call the baling twine and duct tape mentality. Fred or Sue on the shop floor, she's got to solve that problem right now so we can get product out the door. standards and rigor be damned, right? That's the cost of doing business. So somehow, with the right mindset, with the right change management, with the right solutions and the right level of interoperability, we can absolutely reduce cost and complexity. And that's when the light bulb goes off for these manufacturing leaders. It comes down to a clear line of sight between the outcomes that they need to accomplish and that they have been accomplishing for years, but to do so in a way that drives down cost and complexity. Because, by the way, most large enterprises consist of a handful of large plants, some medium-sized plants, and a lot of small plants. And it's those small plants that need this innovation as much as the large and medium-sized plants, but rarely get the attention because the cost of these solutions has been highly prohibitive. And in many ways, that equates to the small-medium manufacturing challenge, right? The small-medium manufacturers in this nation make up 98.4% of all manufacturing companies.
Oh, wow.
They need access to these capabilities. They can't afford it today. When we reduce the cost and complexity for everyone, guess what? These small, medium manufacturers can get engaged. They can drive productivity. They can improve quality. They can become a much more competitive and productive manufacturing operation as well.
It seems like that's CESMII's mission. You're not just going after Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 100 companies, but it's American investments, right? Now, can you give me a specific example? Like, we've defined at this point what interoperability means. We talked about a little bit of the challenge, but can you tell me like a business transformation where we've leveraged this concept and the impact that it's had for a specific end user?
Yeah, so I'll pick a very small manufacturer as an example because it drives home the point. I'll start though by saying that we've sort of characterized the journey to interoperability through what we call the 3 smart manufacturing imperatives. The foundation for smart manufacturing and interoperability is this idea of a data foundation consisting of standardized information models. The idea today is whether you're sitting down with a Schneider software product or any of your competitors, you're building and developing data context from scratch every single time. And there's no incentive in this community for anyone to share those. And there's no way for them to be shared because they vary from the structure varies from vendor to vendor. But the idea that we can crowdsource these, that we can collaborate, come together as a community and build these standardized information models, put them in a marketplace in a standards-based environment, and make them accessible for every platform, for every manufacturer for free, that's the idea that begins this journey towards reducing cost and complexity. So once you've got this idea of a standardized information model for a pump, for a conveyor, for a compressor, for a paper converting machine, for an oven, for a calendar, no matter, for a CNC, a robot, whatever the manufacturing asset, once you've got a standardized information model, at the platform layer, you can treat those information models, and these are some of the IT concepts that we're bringing into the OT world, treat these information models as what we call type safe, meaning they're protected from anyone modifying or meddling with them. And then the third SM imperative is to expose those objects, those information models through an API, through a standard API. That's the latest and the newest of our initiatives to create an open standard API that allows any platform to expose those information models, that equipment, those processes. Remember, you got them free out of a marketplace, and allows any application to discover those objects in any platform and discover the relationships between those objects. And what that means is on your journey to interoperability, a small manufacturer can, and this is the case of a small manufacturing company in Medina, Ohio, with less than 20 employees. They had a major issue where they had quality and reliability challenges. They could never afford to hire, buy some of the sophisticated software solutions that they were being sold and the systems integration consulting effort to implement those. But when we engaged with them through a small systems integrator that was able to bring these concepts to life, they were able to take a standards-based information model for a waste scale, for a small PLC controller, bring that information into the cloud with no on-premise infrastructure, and using Excel, solve their quality and reliability challenges for less than $4,000. Just an extraordinary capital project for this tiny manufacturing company that would have had to spend probably $100,000 in a non-interoperable environment. And so this was, from our perspective, one of the great examples of a small manufacturer who, for the first time, was able to access smart manufacturing in ways that they could afford, and just as importantly, in ways that they could sustain. Because frankly, they didn't have a lot of IT staff in-house to sustain heavy on-premise infrastructure. They didn't have a lot of expertise in-house to connect these things together. But with these crowdsourced and open approaches to automation and to information collection, they now have a data platform. They don't call it that, but they now have a data platform, and whether they want to put Excel on top of it, or one of your great solutions, or a Power BI solution on top of it, they all work against the same API, against the same data platform, which is exactly where we want to see the industry go.
Yeah, that's a great example for sure.
So does it make sense to describe it as a software-agnostic information model?
100%.
Because I think when you say information model, we automatically we assume it's software.
Yeah.
But the information model is actually independent of how it's codified, whether it's in hardware or software. This is how something is supposed to work. This is how something is defined. This is the names we call it. This is the process by which, it's an information model about work, the work to be done. Whether it's the work to be done at a very granular level on a filling machine, or the work of a line, or the work of the factory.
That's exactly right. Fundamentally, every machine, no matter whether it's built by the same machine builder or disparate machine builders, it's going to have a different way of structuring data.
Yeah.
Every single machine is different from its neighbor. So you've got what we call unstructured data down there. We have applications, AI models, outcomes that would demand structure, but in the middle, this idea that we can create a standards-based information model to create a common semantic, define in a vendor-agnostic way what that looks like. That's the power of this approach.
Yeah. And because to date, for the last 3 decades of building these systems, the model was sort of inherent in a way a particular vendor had designed it. It wasn't necessarily vendor independent.
100%. Yeah, correct.
Yeah, and the other thing that I actually, when we unpacked that with Jonathan from your team, was the addition of the graph relational database, right? And I thought that was particularly innovative because it's something that, we've really missed in the industry is really that relational database. And for those listening that don't understand that, that's essentially how social media companies determine your relation. So if you're on Facebook or LinkedIn, it says that John is connected to Shri is also connected to Don. It creates that relational database. And that's really, really powerful in this manufacturing paradigm, because now with these models, you can actually expose the data and figure out causation and correlation that you wouldn't even have dreamed of before when you have this stream. So I thought that was very, very powerful part.
Yeah, it really is. Software solutions, and I've never, until maybe the last 2 years, I've never seen a manufacturing system or platform that isn't hierarchical. In other words, the ISA 95 model kind of taught us we've got the enterprise, we've got the site, we've got the area, we've got the line, the asset, and we've been good students and we've figured that out. But when you bring material or people or energy into that process, all of a sudden the hierarchical model falls down. Mm-hmm. And then you've got to do really strange things with your platform, with your application to sort of force these non-hierarchical systems into a hierarchy. And by the way, that's where AI falls down too, because AI at its core wants to infer relationships and wants to infer value from different relationships and different aspects of how maybe a piece of equipment and an operator and material interact. But fundamentally, in a hierarchical system, that's just not coded unless it's custom coded every single time. So, as you pointed out, Facebook first began kind of open source their knowledge graph capabilities, which have now become accessible to manufacturing. And that's one of the smart manufacturing imperatives that we've been bringing to the marketplace, is to say that any information model, any object, any piece of equipment, any material, any operator, any object can be created, or any relationship between those objects can be created, and they change over time, so the history of those relationships are also necessary, and that's what's then exposed through an API, both the objects, the data that flows through those objects, and the relationships now and historically is such a powerful, powerful way of enabling any application to be a more intelligent, intuitive application, but more importantly than ever, the AI can now infer real value from these relationships and the data in ways that can be scaled very, very rapidly from site to site and from enterprise to enterprise.
I mean, we talk all the time about AI at scale.
Well,
and that's,
yeah. So I feel like, this is so vitally important, but we still get lost in sort of inside speak. So I was trying to figure out how do we get this for somebody at the leadership level to have the aha moment? So I was thinking, let's take the UN as the example. If every country comes in with different languages, what you need is translators. But that's exactly what we have. We have layers and layers of translators to, from at different levels of the stack. And when we say technical debt, that's exactly what it is. Technical debt is layers and layers of translators and translations that are happening. And, I had this aha moment only in life sciences, because in life sciences, it's this highly validated environment and with all kinds of regulatory compliance, for the very reason that they're making some, a little pill that you're going to put in your mouth and it's going to have a certain effect on your body. So it has to be manufactured with precision. And it's all about, quality, the data, all that stuff. And when you go through layers of translation and all these Frankenstein integrations, you lose trust in the data, right?
Absolutely.
And that aha moment for a CEO to go, oh, of course, I have all these layers of translation that I have. How do I minimize these? How do we get people to agree on sort of a common set? Start thinking about an information model for the business, for the business unit, the line, etc. Anyway, so that's I've been struggling how do you create that sort of light bulb moment?
Yeah, and in fact, those are the conversations that we're having right now, and trying to understand how we can more effectively have those conversations, because until a corporate executive says this is the transformation we're going to make, we're going to actually, instead of buying and implementing the next stovepipe architecture, the next data silo, we're actually going to transform the way we do manufacturing systems. And it's going to be based on this new approach, these three smart manufacturing imperatives. And thankfully, many of the great manufacturing companies that we get to partner with and collaborate with here at CESMII are willing to take that journey. And when I say willing, they're making a bet, but it's a bet towards reducing cost and complexity and positioning themselves for the massive productivity gains that they're challenged with. Virtually every large manufacturer has an ongoing, relentless annual productivity target. And frankly, this is the way I start most of my conversations with them, because they can relate to it. Manufacturing productivity in the US has been on the decline for the first time in recorded history the last 5 years. And so looking for ways to dramatically and significantly improve manufacturing productivity is a conversation most leaders want to have. Can you have the conversation about technology, about people, about systems, about architectures, and about outcomes in one conversation, in one in one sort of discussion, that's the challenge that we have, and that's the opportunity we have in working with great partners with you to have those together.
Yeah, we're excited to be part of CESMII. I think it's, and it feels like the mindset challenge is bigger than the actual technical viability of this.
Very much so, and a big part of it is helping manufacturers understand the disconnect between their business strategy and what they're doing with their digital or smart manufacturing strategy. Because as it turns out, most manufacturers don't have a cohesive digital or smart manufacturing strategy. And when that epiphany happens, the rest kind of falls into place, because it is about sort of a corporate and plant level collaboration. This won't happen if the plants aren't asking for it or pushing for it. And if corporate's there to support it, great. But so all those pieces have to be aligned, and that comes through some of the other important and strategic things that we've been investing in, as you know, which is the smart manufacturing business assessments and the certified road mapping professionals, part of which you have invested in. So
Yeah, I've taken that class.
yeah. So those are all important parts of making progress on this journey, because it's a journey. We've been on a 30-year journey of stovepipe architectures and data silos. The next 30 years can't be marked by the same approach, and so that's the maybe the last thing I would say, at least on this thread, is we're at an inflection point, and I'm very aggressive in telling every manufacturer I have the opportunity to speak with. You can continue propagating this technical debt, this cost and complexity, or you can choose a different way, a way that will lead you towards productivity, competitiveness, and fundamentally enabled by interoperability.
Well, John, I couldn't have said that any better myself. It's definitely great advice for the community. I definitely want to thank you again for taking the time out of your schedule to sit with us and share your insights to the community out there. Just in closing, where can people learn a little bit more about what you do? Is there any call to action you want to leave the audience with?
Yeah, so we're a consortia, and one of the things I found in my years here at CESMII is, as Americans, we're as individualistic as corporations as we are as people, meaning we don't like collaborating. I loved hearing your CEO this morning start with the value of partnerships and the idea that you can't do this on your own. The very name of your ecostructure is sort of tied into ecosystems and partnering. And so from our perspective, one of the most important things I think we can instill is a mindset that's biased towards collaboration and partnering. And we're a vendor agnostic consortia with a lot of great thinkers and organizations like yours at the table working together to solve problems. And that's what you'll find at CESMII.org, our website, CESMII.org. We have a sort of a three-pronged strategy around knowledge, around technology, and around ecosystem or collaboration. All three of them have to be a vital part of any transformation, and that's why we're structured the way we are. And again, really appreciate the chance to do that with Schneider Electric and the team you've assembled here. This is a phenomenal partnership, and looking forward to doing more with you.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your mission. That was the first time I think I've seen industrial giants on a call together that are brutal enemies, competitors. So
Yeah.
You guys are really driving the partnership. That's it for us on this episode of Practitioners Unplugged. We hope you found this conversation as interesting and as insightful as us. Until next time, keep practicing, keep innovating, and we'll see you when we see you.